back inside the Beltway where it is indeed a beautiful April. I've been told that it's the nicest April in 10 years, and sure enough it is. Got my 5 miles in along the Potomac this morning, got back yesterday. I'm feeling right at home. Very Beltway-ish. Luckily, the president also made some news today doing a New Jersey tarmac gaggle. Let's dip into that, cut number 4.
We had a good meeting. It was a nice meeting. It was a beautiful meeting. I'll tell you, it's the nicest office I've ever seen. It's a beautiful, beautiful team. But he was very, he wants to do something good for his country. I think he's doing a good job and he's working hard. We'll see what happens. It's a very complicated deal. What did he tell you, Mr. President? He told me that he needs more weapons, but he's just saying weapons a year. He needs more weapons, and we're going to see what happens. I want to see what happens with respect to Russia. Because Russia has been surprised and disappointed, very disappointed that they did the bombing of those places after this guy.
He kept being asked about Russia, so he kept answering. Cut number 5.
What do you want? Why did they bring the news? Well, I want them to stop shooting, sit down, and sign a deal. We have the confines of a deal, I believe, and I want him to sign it and be done with it and just go back to life.
Now, he had one more thing to say, cut number 6.
We're losing a lot of people. We have 3,000-4,000 people dying every single week. That's a lot of people to lose. You can imagine parents waving from Ukraine and from Russia, waving to their son as he leaves. And, you know, a week later he's dead on a battlefield, all carved up, chopped up. I see that. I see the satellite pictures. They're horrible. They're horrible. I would say it can't get any worse. Body parts laying all over. I don't even like looking at them. Body parts laying all over the field. What are they doing? It would have never started if I were president.
So, same message. He has clearly put Putin on the spot. Zelensky's figured it out. This is all about putting Putin on the spot. That's good. Now, he had some nice things to say about the Iran deal today, so I sat down, I wrote my column for Fox News tomorrow saying, all right, on even days he wakes up and he says something nice about the Iran deal, and on odd days he wakes up and says, we're going to have to bomb Iran. And whenever he does that, he's just doing the art of the deal thing. This was column A, this was column B, pick one, Iran. And the people who have got JCPOA, PTS, freak out. Donald Trump is not going to get taken by the Tehran mullahs. Not going to happen. He brought them to their knees in his first term. This would all be over if he had won re-election in 2020, but he didn't, and therefore we're doing it again now, and he has to bring them to their knees. And they had an enormous explosion, by the way, just an enormous explosion in Iran at their major port. And the death toll, the official death toll, the Iranian official death toll, is 65 people. But they never tell us. Meanwhile, their foreign ministry is saying it was the Jews. Yeah, it wasn't the Jews. It was the fact that they were importing solid propellant from China and leaving it lying around on the port, and someone smoked a cigarette. That's the big story of the day. Iran is reeling. Maybe they really will disarm in an effort to save the regime. They are reeling. Now I want to go to Tom Homan, border czar. Gave a long White House press because you know why I did this? 100 days. The number one thing that Trump has gotten done is he closed the border. Now remember, for 4 years, Joe Biden said he couldn't do it. Donald Trump has it done in 100 days. And when I mean closed, they had 9 people this weekend. 9. Used to be thousands a weekend. 9. They took into custody. You know why? It's called messaging and enforcement. Tom Homan came out, had a lot to say. Cut number 16.
Look, I started in the Border Patrol in 1984. I've been at this for over 40 years. I worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. Every president ever worked for took border security seriously because you can't have national security if you don't have strong border security. We got to know who's coming in, what's coming in, where's coming in, why it's coming in, right? Even President Obama and President Clinton took some steps to secure the border because they understood national security was important. Joe Biden was the first president in the history of this nation who came in office and unsecured a border on purpose. That's just a fact. We handed the Biden administration, after President Trump's first administration, we handed the Biden administration the most secure border in my lifetime, and he unsecured it on purpose. Now President Trump and this administration here, the success is unprecedented. We beat Trump's first administration on border success. Border numbers are historic low. Today, as I'm standing here, we are the most secure border in the history of this nation. And the numbers prove it.
That's really quite something to say. And he kept going on with the numbers, cut number 17.
We just went over the numbers, and let me talk about a few numbers that are important to me. Under the Biden administration, we averaged over 11,000 many days, over 12,000, even some days 15,000 illegal entrants in the United States. 15,000. You know what the number was the last 24 hours? 178. 15,000 to 178. Unprecedented success. On an average day in the Biden administration, known gotaways. People we knew crossed the border because they're on video, drone traffic, or sensor traffic. Crossed the border, weren't apprehended, weren't fingerprinted, weren't vetted. Average day under Joe Biden, more than 1,800 gotaways. Yesterday, 38. 38 too many? We'll get that to 0. But we went from 1,800 to 38. And finally, that was said earlier, under the first 100 days, what was actually January 20th to April 1st, last year, 184,000 illegal aliens were released into the United States. Under this administration, 9. 4 of them were material witnesses in a criminal investigation. We need them here to testify in a serious criminal trial. 4 was extreme medical condition. We couldn't return them because they were in such bad shape. And 1 was a humanitarian issue. This is unprecedented success. The border secure. President Trump saving lives. President Trump has proven no one does this better than President Trump. There is no equal, it's not even close.
Cut number 18.
As I said from day one, you don't have to support ICE's operations. You can support sanctuary cities if that's what you desire to do. Sanctuary cities can stand aside and watch ICE keep their communities safe, because any public official, whether you're mayor, city councilman, or governor, their number one responsibility is protection of communities. And ICE has been clear, we're targeting public safety threats and national security threats. I can't believe there's any elected official, and especially a judge, that doesn't believe we should be doing that, and they should be helping us. What I said from day one, you can sit aside and watch, you can argue against us all you want and protest all you want, but when you cross that line, I've said this 1,000 times, when you cross that line to impediment or knowingly harboring, concealing an illegal alien from ICE, you will be prosecuted, judge or not.
And he had one warning for everyone in the country without permission, cut number 24.
The registration requirements under 8 U.S.C. 1302, if you're illegal alien in the United States, this message is for you. You cannot hide from ICE. We're actively looking for you. Federal law requires every alien in the United States who has been present in the United States more than 30 days needs to register. For those 14 years or older, you need to be fingerprinted with the Department of Homeland Security. Federal law requires every alien in the United States to tell DHS in writing if you have a change in address within 10 days of changing that address. Failing to register with DHS and failure to tell DHS about your new address are criminal offenses, and they're going to be treated as such. Starting today. Make no mistake, if you're in the country illegally and you fail to do what the law requires, we will prosecute you, you will go to jail, then we'll deport you. Second law, penalties for failure to depart. 8 U.S.C. 1253. If you're alien inside the United States who has a final order, this message is for you. If you have a final order, the Trump administration is committed to enforcing our immigration laws, especially for those aliens who have received final orders of deportation. There are currently around 1.4 million illegal aliens who have been ordered removed but remain here in violation of the law. We will aggressively prosecute, consistent with long-standing law, those aliens for failing or refusing to depart or who takes other related actions aimed at hindering their removal. You cannot open the door. You cannot answer questions. You cannot open your car door. You consider it to evade law enforcement. If you fail to leave the United States after receiving a removal order, we can and will issue monetary fines up to $998 a day.
That's everybody, people. He's talking to everybody. Take note. I have in my hand an Olivia Beaver's story. These GOP lawmakers could sink Trump's big, beautiful bill. No, Olivia, no, it's not going to happen. But let's go through what it is. What groups have you identified as the potential saboteurs of the one big, beautiful bill?
Well, some of them we've talked about on your show before. It's the um, Republicans in states that tend to be a little bit pricier, like California, New York, New Jersey, who care a lot about SALT and raising the $10,000 cap on state and local taxes. Those members include Mike Lawler, who have threatened not to vote for this bill if there is not some sort of adjustment in that case. Then we get to Medicaid, and you have a series of Republicans who are threatening to oppose it there as well. Jeff Van Drew, David Valadao, who we quote in the story, they're someone who's raising concerns. And then you get to rollbacks of the Biden era climate bill. And there's some who basically saw a lot of investment in their states and districts with these energy tax credits, and they are basically urging the Trump administration not to take back this sort of investment and funding. So those are sort of like some of the key groups that we honed in on and looked at their names. But there's also some broader kind of differences that, and the biggest one that we live with is the the budget hawks that we have also discussed, who want to see serious cuts being made, and I think Speaker Johnson is working with them to try to find that. The question is whether Senate Republicans will stomach the cuts that the House ultimately comes up with.
Now, the Senate can afford to lose 3 votes. Lisa Murkowski is probably one of them. I'm not sure that there's anyone else who's in favor of that. And I did see that both Hask and Sask released a joint priority list today. Did you see their $150 billion spend and how it was allocated?
I only saw the top line that they had released it and what the price tag was. I haven't had a chance to dive in too deeply into the details of where they're allocating.
Well, it's a lot of money and a lot of programs, from the nuclear triad to basic pay and benefits for our enlisted soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. I think it's very hard to vote against that, and I think it's very hard to vote against the border security. So I really don't know if this is...
The dome, the missile dome that Mike Waltz
Yes.
was pushing for. I think in the Trump administration, I think some money is also going towards that too.
Yeah, the Golden Dome. The Golden Dome for the Golden
Golden,
Age.
thank
Yeah, it's all in there. So I just think maybe when push comes to shove, I also had Senator Lankford and Chairman Smith on last week. They're both pretty confident that they can get the yes on the SALT deduction. It's really going to come down to the Medicaid and how that's done.
Yeah, that's a huge element. And if the cuts are made for sort of the budget hawks who have been arguing that they want it to be, budget neutral, and they will basically be able to see that once they put pen to paper. And this is when they're actually going to be doing the committee markups this week. So there's a bunch that are sort of being planned today, planned throughout the rest of the week. And on some of the sort of prickly topics that they're still sorting out, they're doing it kind of privately, and then they're going into these markup meetings. So
Are you going to any of the other markups?
What?
I mean, are you going to sit through them?
I think my team and I are going to be figuring out how we divvy up for them, but there definitely is going to be a good group that we're going to be watching. And
I've only been to one markup in my life. It was the most excruciatingly boring thing I've ever been to. Are you prepared to be bored?
Oh, it happens more often than you think. I know sometimes people think journalism might be glamorous, but Many other times you're sitting outside a door for 10 hours waiting for a quote and or covering a very dry and kind of boring markup hearing to get the story. So yes, I have survived many a markups, but
Is there
it's
any
a
other
process.
interesting thing happening this summer? Because the debt limit's been rolled into the reconciliation, so that's usually a standalone showdown. The appropriations have been passed until after the showdown over reconciliation and the budget. I really don't see anything else happening. Is anything else going to happen?
I mean, those are the major legislative issues. I find that we're at a time where reporters have a ton to cover, and the House and the Senate and the White House are so interconnected that we're not going to be lacking stories. I mean, right now we're still looking at how tariffs are impacting Republicans. I know that's not necessarily legislative, but you could have some moderates who sign on and basically try to rein in the president's authorities on that, which you're seeing a little bit. But the reconciliation one is really where our attention is right now.
Yeah, it's everything. Don't spend a lot of time waiting for people to repeal the president's tariffs. That's not going to happen. If that happens, that's going to happen in the First Circuit. And there's a good argument that it violates the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, but we will wait and see on that. Olivia Beavers, always a pleasure to talk to you. Follow Olivia on X
Yeah.
at Olivia_Beavers. Follow the Wall Street Journal at WSJ. Generalissimo, yesterday we were testing out the equipment, and you arrived in the studio with a shirt that blinded me momentarily. I was just wondering, did you burn that shirt immediately thereafter?
No, I sent it off to dry cleaning for next year's soiree.
Well, the soiree is the Tiki Room Fest.
Tiki Land Day.
And Tiki Land Day involves not my PhD weightloss.com food.
It doesn't really involve, well, I guess it really doesn't involve food at all. Some people had Dole Whips, which is definitely not on the list. I didn't partake.
They had what?
Dole Whips. Do you know what that is?
No.
That is pineapple flavored ice cream.
That's not on the list.
That is not on the list.
However, I was with, I gave a talk to the California Republican Leadership Academy on Saturday night before leaving.
So it was like a small
Great.
group meeting.
No, it was a charter. It was very well attended.
Oh, okay.
Chartered school fundraiser, and big fan of the show is on my PhD weight loss, and it's cooking. She's cooking with gas.
It
and
works.
She wanted me to know that.
It works.
864
644
1900. That's
864
644
1900.
But you may not go to the Tiki Lounge Day and have
Tiki Land Day.
Tiki Lounge Land Day.
No, there's no lounge involved. It's Tiki Land Day.
Tiki Land Day.
Yes.
You know, I don't even know how you can get a whole day out of that really old and boring feature.
Well, because we also did the Jungle Cruise, and there was a scavenger hunt.
You are such a nerd. But
Look who's talking.
I'm a hard charging political reporter. You're a nerd. 864
644.
1900. You Disney nerd. And
At
my
least I'm not just excruciating on the stupid Browns.
Well, Terry Polito and I will do that later because the center of
Speaking
the
of
sports
nerd.
universe was Cleveland this weekend, and it really
cares.
was.
Nobody
864
644.
1900. That's myPhDweightloss.com. Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, was also on with Brian Kilmeade this weekend, giving details about a big ice raid in Boulder. I thought it was in Colorado Springs. Cut number 12.
America is safer tonight thanks to Donald Trump. Last night, Brian, what they did, to back up, during the Biden administration, they received 170 911 calls to that club alone. That club we were just watching, 170 calls. Wouldn't you think that would have been a red flag? Nothing happened. Guns, shootings, ag batteries, nothing happened. So under Donald Trump, DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals, ATF, ICE, everyone went in together. DEA led this investigation, went in, got 115 illegal immigrants, aliens in our country, arrested them. 2 with warrants, 12 guns seized. So what would happen in this club is you would go in, security would give you a menu of drugs. Cocaine, there's something new called pink cocaine, meth, you could go in a bathroom stall, get that, there was prostitution, all these things going on. And we just now identified a member of Sinaloa cartel was also in there.
So, yeah, I believe it's in Colorado Springs, and it was a big bust. Pam Bondi went on to say this, cut number 13.
How much harder is your job in these sanctuary cities?
It's difficult, but we have Tom Homan, we have HSI, we have incredible partners working with us to get in there. And, you know, state law enforcement, Brian, they want to do their jobs, most of them. Their hands have just been tied.
It's going to have to go right up the court
It
ladder.
sure is, and that's what we're doing.
Right.
And now he also, it was a great interview. Tom Homan also continued his press conference at the White House today and put an actual number on the illegals during the Biden years, cut number 22.
Well, first of all, how many illegal aliens I think in the United States? At least 20 million. He said, where'd you come up with that number? We've been speaking about 12 million for 20 years. We know we got 10.5 that we know of came to the border. How many don't we know of? I talked about known gotaways at 2 million. How many unknown gotaways we have? Like between the Big Bend sector in Texas where there's no technology, how many 1,000 people dig across through there? We wouldn't know. We would know now. But, you know, so I would venture over 20 million. But your question is, last count, last I looked, there was about 700,000 illegal aliens with criminal charges walking the streets of this country. 700,000. And that's what we're looking for now. That's what we're prioritizing. Them and national security threats.
Cut number 23.
I don't know why. It's sick. It's the worst crime in the world is when you sexually assault a child. I mean, the most innocent of us all. But that's why I made a statement that one time I was going to go to Boston, bring hell with me, and the media went crazy. At Tom Homan says he's going to go to Boston, bring hell with him. I was going to bring hell to illegal aliens that rape children. There's not more of a heinous crime, and as you can see, the amount of child rapists we've arrested under this administration that could have been arrested under the Biden administration. They were out there. They had their final orders. They were out there. But they didn't go look for them. They were too busy releasing millions of illegal aliens in this country. And the numbers prove it. The removal numbers of criminals was the lowest. ICE had the lowest number of removals in the history of ICE under Joe. At the same time, you had historic illegal immigration on the border. ICE had the lowest numbers in the history of the agency. That shows the difference between two administrations. We're looking for every one of them. People want to know, okay, when am I going to retire for the third time? I'll retire when every public safety threat, national security threat, child rape is eradicated from this country. That's when I'll rest.
Good for Tom Homan. Now, I think the biggest accomplishment of Donald Trump in his first 100 days, by a lot, is closing the border for two reasons. One, it allows us to deal with the problems that came in over the past 4 years when it comes to violent offenders, fentanyl dealers, gangs, terrorist gangs, cartels. You close the border, it doesn't get worse. Number two, it proved it could be done. So when you vote for a Democrat, any Democrat, anywhere in the country, you're voting to go back to that. On Friday night, everyone went home, but I went to special report because I love doing the panel. And the subject was the Wisconsin judge, state judge, who decided she was above the law and was going to help an illegal alien escape arrest and detention by ICE. That came up on the panel, cut number 1.
All right, Hugh, what about this? I mean, I've heard from legal experts on really all sides ideologically saying there appears to have been obstruction here, and that is a crime.
Yeah, I don't think it's a closed case, Brett. I listened to Attorney General Bondi talk earlier about how the judge escorted the defendant who was under the ICE investigation out the back door along with the defendant's counsel to evade the ICE people in the hallway after engaging in a shouting match with them. Look, everyone is subject to the same law in the United States. A robe is not an invisibility cloak. I think they've got her cold to rights, and I don't know what happens. I don't know what kind of punishment goes for obstruction and concealment. But the way that General Bondi laid down the facts, it's open and shut. She was breaking the law. All right, and they came back around on the issue of Supreme Court and District Court generally, cut number 2.
More broadly, Hugh, and we've talked about this before, the pushback from different federal district judges. President Trump asked about that, specifically on the immigration issues on Air Force One.
We have hundreds of thousands of people that we want to get out of the country. And the courts are holding us back. It's unbelievable when you hear a judge in San Francisco or a judge in San Diego does nationwide injunctions having to do with the whole country, sitting behind a bench, a local bench, even though in some cases, in many cases, they're a federal judge, but a judge can close down. We should close down sanctuary cities.
I mean, there's headlines all over the place. Blocks from withholding funds for 16 sanctuary cities. Judge orders administration to seek return of another deported migrant. Judge blocks part of President Trump's order calling for proof of citizenship to vote. We also had the judges on the deportation of the Venezuelans step in and stop that. You know, where does this go, Hugh?
Well, I think it goes long into the summer, and the Supreme Court may not want to get too far away from the District of Columbia this summer, Brett. Normally they leave beginning of July, and they don't come back until September. I think this summer they're going to have to be prepared for a lot of shadow docket work. The district courts really have sort of let the bit out of their mouth, and they are running wild. And I don't even pay attention to the district court rulings anymore once it gets to the circuit, because some of them are ideological, some of them are obviously political, that we just got to wait for the Supreme Court to weigh in. And I hope eventually rein in these district court judges. It is ridiculous. It's actually kind of ridiculous, and they'll end up getting what they deserve. The court will eventually issue a rule having to do with when it is appropriate, when it isn't appropriate for a district court judge to issue a nationwide injunction. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz on with Maria Bartiromo this morning, talking about the mineral deal with the Ukraine, cut number 7.
Is the Ukraine rare earth minerals deal going to get done?
Oh, the Ukraine deal is going to get done. The negotiators were working hard over the weekend. Okay. That is first and foremost on both Secretary Bessent and the president's mind. It's going to get done, Maria. President's determined to make it so.
And then he had got a bigger question, the 100 days question from Maria, and National Security Advisor Waltz answered about President Trump's first 100 days, cut number 8.
How iconic. That setting, that scene, that meeting is going to go down in the history books for President Trump to be a president of peace, to be talking peace and diplomacy in the Vatican of all places, just before we were able to walk out and the president sat with world leaders, people of all faiths, hundreds of thousands in the crowd. And the thing he was determined to do was to talk to Zelensky face to face and talk about how we're going to get the largest land war in Europe to an end. Both sides have to want that. He's expressed his frustration with both sides, but yet his determination. And if you go back to, we're 100 days in, Maria, just 100 days ago, Biden and his team had no end in sight. This was an endless war. This was a meat grinder of men and material and national treasure that really he had never defined victory. And President Trump is determined to use diplomacy to bring this war to an end, to talk to both sides. And just in 100 days, we've had multiple rounds led by Secretary of State Rubio, by Ambassador Steve Witkoff in Saudi Arabia, and now in the Vatican. And it was just truly special to stand there with other world leaders looking on as President Trump led the way.
That is it was a good shot, and it was a good moment. I hope it yields fruit. J.B. Pritzker is Democrat, governor of Illinois, big man, chunky, and he had the opportunity to bring the nation together and call on everyone to be unified and work together towards the same ends, but he chose a different course. Cut number 30.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption, but I am now. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
I'm not sure if he said obstruction or destruction. Let's play it again. Listen to the beginning. Does Governor Pritzker say he's never called for protest and disruption or protest and obstruction? Cut number 30.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption. But I am now.
What was that? Was it destruction or obstruction? What was it?
Disruption, I heard.
Disruption. Well, that's a third choice. Either way, it's not calling for registration of voters. It's kind of a loudmouth thing to say, and it's, again, in defense of illegal immigrants getting to stay in the United States. And the kind of people they're seeking to deport, the 100 people they rounded up in Colorado Springs, those are J.B. Pritzker's people. And you know what? I don't think J.B. Pritzker is going to be president of the United States. So in his mind, he thinks he is. If you're missing Dennis Prager, remember there's always Pragertopia. Here's a little bit of Dennis to get you through till his return in June, we hope.
This may be very, very helpful to many of you. How often have you thought that you've looked back at a period in your life and said, that was a really happy period in my life, or I was really happy then? I bet that vast numbers of you have that.
I wouldn't know if vast numbers of you have that. Dennis did the happiness hour. I will tell you, they're all collected at Pragertopia, and they put up new offerings every day. If you're missing Dennis, go join Pragertopia. If you missed me, I was on the Hannity Show on Friday night with guest host and old friend Katie Pavlik talking about judges both in Wisconsin and New Mexico, cut number 31.
So, Hugh, I've covered this border issue for many, many years, and I've always been very concerned about the issue of corruption at the border and that seeping its way into the United States judicial system. Here we are now with a judge in Wisconsin, which is not a southern border state, and a judge in New Mexico now being caught up in the situation where, according to Attorney General Pam Bondi, the photos that were found on the phones of these criminal aliens include decapitations, lots of criminal activity. And yet, for some reason, these judges just decided to be involved with these two men. It's hard for me to believe that it was at no cost or that there wasn't some kind of potential bribe for their good-hearted nature of harboring them inside the courtroom or also in their home.
Well, Katie, I don't know about New Mexico. I did take the time to read the FBI agents' affidavits who were part of the Wisconsin case. There were 6 members on the ICE team that went to courtroom on the 6th floor of the Wisconsin or the Milwaukee Superior Court building. There were 6, and they talked to Judge Dugan, and she raised her voice, and she sent them away, and then she spirited out in front of there were 8 other proceedings. The victim of the illegal aliens' alleged domestic violence was watching, so was a victim witness assistant who was trying to help the victim out. Everyone saw what happened. It's like there are 20 to 30 witnesses of Judge Dugan leading the defendant in the criminal proceeding through the jury door, out the back door, along with counsel. That is obstruction and concealment, as Greg noted. It's 2 felonies. It's 6 years in prison, potentially $350,000 fine. Now, I don't think there's any corruption there except ideological. Down near the border, I don't know. But this up in Wisconsin, as former Governor Scott Walker put out on X not long ago, it's just an ideological blowout of this judge who apparently thought she was above the law. She's not. She's not. And I was thinking about what Katie said afterward. The New Mexico story is so weird. She's probably right to worry that the cartel's got a hold of this now ex-judge because he had resigned immediately, like the gig was up for him. Not sure what's going to happen with the ideologue up north. I'll cover it all and any news that breaks and a market update just in time for the release by the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee of their reconciliation overview. And to walk through that with me, I've asked Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy, now a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, to join me. Hello, Admiral. It's great to be back in the Beltway. It's not miserable here. That's odd. I caught the one day of the year it's not miserable here.
Thanks. Yeah. So you came here, so I flew out to San Francisco just to maintain the
Of course.
3-hour
Of
differential
course.
between us.
All right. Now, I don't know if you've seen the Ask overview yet. Did it make it out to the Golden Gate City yet?
I've seen a review of it. I have not read the
All right.
whole document yet. What's
Let's
going into
start. I'm just going to run down the 10 bullets for your reaction. Number one,
Yes.
$9 billion for service member quality of life, funds increases in allowances and special pays, as well as improvements to housing, health care, and assistance to military families. What says Admiral Montgomery?
I like that. If we have less than $9 billion in mold in our barracks, I'll be shocked. But we've got to get at that. We've got to get at. I mean, some of these aren't acceptable. You know, my son's a young junior officer right now, so I get a chance to see how the junior end lives right now, and I'd say it's suboptimal. And I think anything to improve either the pay or the extra benefits that young sailors get is critical. We don't need young sailors, close to qualifying for SNAP. We need to get it some distance away from that if we're going to retain the right quality people.
All right, number two, $34 billion for shipbuilding and maritime industrial base, expands the size, enhances the capability of our naval fleet, invests in autonomous surface and subsurface technology, builds capacity, improves infrastructure in the maritime industrial base. Enough or a beginning?
This is a beginning, and it's a beginning in two ways. You're mentioning resources here, basically $34 billion. That's basically over up to a 10-year period, but probably this would be pretty, of the money we're talking about, this would probably get out the door reasonably quickly. It needs to be, it's not increasing the base of shipbuilding, right? The part of the consistent part of the defense bill each year that goes to shipbuilding. That also has to increase. Now, not $34 billion, but it has to increase because when you look at Congressional Budget Office analysis of Navy shipbuilding plans to get to the kind of number that President Trump talks about, to get up to 375 to 385 ships, is going to take a change in the base budget of shipbuilding. So this is good. It's a start. And one other thing I'll mention, we still need that maritime shipbuilding team at the National Security Council to be coming up with the right rule changes, law changes, authorizations, presidential decision making that allows the money to get spent most efficiently and effectively. So this is the start of resources. It's got to be joined by more resources and, equally importantly, the appropriate authorities and guidance to spend it right.
All right, now this one's very interesting to me. $25 billion with a B for Golden Dome for America, supports President Trump's vision for a layered missile defense shield for America, develops the space-based assets needed to support the system, rapidly accelerates defense against hypersonic threats to the homeland. Is that enough?
Again, this is a good plug to get us on the right path. The base will have to be set right. So service, particularly the Space Force, which has a pretty low budget relative to the other services, is going to need the consistent money to replenish the satellites. A lot of this is going to be based on satellite-based systems, or the satellite itself only lasts 4 to 7 years. So there's a replenishment aspect to this, what we call life cycle maintenance. So it's a start. I do think it's critical that General Gutlein or whatever 4-star they put in charge of this, biases the system towards space and towards looking forward, even if it's not space-based, but looking forward. It does not buy a whole bunch of 30 and 40-year-old technology like THAAD, Patriot, and Aegis Ashore, which the senators would love them to do if it's manufactured in their state. But you and I, as taxpayers, would like them to think forward, not backwards.
I agree. I think it should be built in Ravenna and ought to be brand new. I saw a plan for Ravenna, Ohio Arsenal. Let me talk to you about the munitions budget. $21 billion plus up for munitions production. Enough?
Well, first of all, this just makes me giddy. I mean, 21 billion's a lot. Unfortunately, the sad answer to your question is probably not enough. And I say this because our munitions cost too much. And we expend, we have adversaries. We plussed up anti-ship cruise missile munitions after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So in 2022, we plus it up. All that stuff delivered in 2024. We literally fired an equivalent number of missiles at Houthi attacks as we brought in to improve our readiness for China. So we obviously did not improve our readiness for China. Our systems are wicked good now because of everything we learned shooting down Houthi missiles. So look, the munitions number is great. It could always be more. And the most important thing we have to do is figure out how to spend it smarter, how to shoot down cruise missiles for less than 3 to 5 million apiece, how to shoot down inter-range ballistic missiles for less than 15 to 20 million apiece. These numbers are astronomical, the cost of some of these defensive systems.
All right, let me tell you the one that disappoints me the most. 13 billion for nuclear deterrence. Accelerates modernization of the triad, improves readiness for our current nuclear deterrent, invests in infrastructure needed to restore America's ability to manufacture nuclear weapons. Columbia alone, the Columbia-class boomers cost $20 billion, Admiral. Is $13 billion, is that
again,
window dressing?
Yes, because the reality is this is supposed to be in the base, right? Sentinel, which is the intercontinental ballistic missile replacement, the B-21, which is the air leg replacement, and the Columbia-class strategic ballistic missile submarine, which is the Ohio-class replacement, are in theory in the Air Force, and Navy budgets. In practice, they're all blowing through their budget targets, particularly Sentinel, which is as I recall now, about a year ago, we just kind of nonchalantly announced, well, it's doubled in budget from about 77 billion to 140 billion because we hadn't calculated things properly on fixing the infrastructure. This 13 billion is this doesn't stop the bleeding. This cleans up some blood that's on the side of the body, right? I mean, we've got real work to do here. The 13 billion is window dressing.
All right, let me talk to you about 11 billion for Pacific deterrence. Expands military exercises, improves readiness of Indo-PACOM forces, acquires capability, builds infrastructure, improves Taiwan's self-defense capabilities. It's a lot of words. It's 11 billion, but I don't think that's enough either.
And sir, that's spread out over a number of years, right? That is not 11 billion in 2025 or 2026 or 2027. That is spread out. Look, it's important. It's giving the COCOM, the Combatant Command, Indo-Pacific Command, some money to execute priorities that he felt, the last few commanders have felt, were not being properly serviced by the military services, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, right? So this is going to be important. They'll use it for exercises. They'll use it for systems that communicate between your key allies like the U.S. and Japan, U.S. and Australia, all three of us together, Korea, Taiwan, those kind of allies, the Philippines. This is going to be very useful, and it can fund the development of our training with the Taiwans. We are at the very lowest level of coordination with the Taiwan military right now. That is a big negative when it comes to deterring China. So giving the PACOM commander the money to drive up our readiness and drive up our integration with the Taiwan military is critical. So I like the 11 billion. It's 11 billion more than we've ever done in this way. But you're right, we could probably spend more.
All right, this one kind of makes me laugh. 7 billion for air superiority. Reverses declines in fighter force posture, accelerates delivery of next-generation aircraft and autonomous systems. I don't even know what that means, but 7 billion does not buy a lot of B-21s.
So this is about, I think it's about F-35, maybe F-47 eventually, and the cooperative, the UA, the unmanned what's called CCA that flies alongside it. Look, the Air Force needs money, just like the Navy. The fight with China is an air maritime fight fought by the Air Force and the Navy, 40% each, Marine Corps, Army, Space, everybody else, 4 or 5% each, 5 to 10% each. I mean, we have to take care of the Air Force. But here's the problem. They're taking care of the wrong thing. The thing that is killing us in our Air Force right now is insufficient refueling aircraft, what's known as the KC-46. They're not delivering fast enough. Boeing has not covered itself in accolades with this. We've got to get the KC-46, not fighter.
$5 billion for border security. This funds DoD personnel and logistics, support to the Department of Homeland Security to carry out border immigration and counter drug enforcement agenda. That enough money to do that? I think it is.
I think so. And this prevents us from creating a little readiness hole in those kind of guard and homeland security and army units, and maybe Air Force units that'll be doing this mission. I guess a ship or two at that point as well. What you don't want to do is do an op with no what's called overseas contingency operations, OCO funding. In other words, spare money to fund it like we had during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. This covers down for that. It prevents readiness gaps, so it's important.
All right. Penultimate. $400 million, not real money, for fiscal responsibility and a clean audit. Invest in IT infrastructure, business systems, new AI capabilities needed to ensure that DoD fully passes an audit. That a Christmas tree item there? Is that a little ornament, Admiral?
Okay, so it does make Congress. Congress has complained for a decade that the Department of Defense either doesn't do an audit or fails an audit. Those are the two choices each year. This is about, there's value in learning what you're not doing efficiently or effectively. 400 million, it probably sounds like a lot of money. I guess when you're auditing a $900 billion budget, it's possible that 400 million is the right amount. I think several hundred million of that, though, is for software to make you be more efficient. The kind of secondary and tertiary things you mentioned there. We'll have to see. We do need an audit. But Congress wasn't going to miss this opportunity to put the money in for it.
All right, very last thing, and it's redundant. That's why I saved it for last. $12 billion with a B to enhance military readiness, expand stocks of spares, improves infrastructure at military depots and shipyards, enhances the capability of special forces. All right, Admiral, just between you and me and the watchers on YouTube, this is a slush fund, isn't it?
Well, okay, so you could say that, but it's also, remember I just said about the border not creating a readiness deficit?
Yeah.
Our operations since October 7th in the Middle East have been only very, very marginally funded by some money that was in the Israeli supplemental that was passed with the Ukraine supplemental and the Asia Pacific supplemental a year ago. So the Biden administration kind of created this budget deficit, this readiness deficit. Remember what I mentioned about the Homeland Security border one? They already created one. I suspect 12 billion's on the lower end of the fix for that. It's about having 2 carrier strike groups and 4 or 5 destroyers. And it's actually been plussed up by President Trump to 2 carrier strike groups. It's about the 3 to 5 extra Air Force squadrons, about the Army THAAD and Patriot systems.
Okay,
so
that
each service
makes
is
sense.
put in. That's what this is about. And the maintenance part of it is for the shipyards to do the maintenance that's backlogged.
That makes sense. Admiral, thank you. I didn't know that we'd get through all 10 of them that came out from Hask and Sass today. I appreciate your being the guy to go to on this. Thank you for your time on the West Coast. Enjoy your time out there. Joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. Hello, Senator Cotton. I hope you noticed that the best quarterback in the draft went to the Browns yesterday.
Good afternoon to you. I hope you're doing well, and congratulations, I guess, on the Browns draft.
I'm not even sure whether that best quarterback is Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, but it's one or the other. Senator, I finished sending in a column for Fox News this morning. I'm going to give you the headline, which is President Trump won't ink a bad deal with Iran. The subheadline is, a bad deal would destroy his legacy while either without genuine nuclear disarmament by the mullahs or the U.S. bombing of Tehran's nuclear facilities guarantees it. Now, my question to you is, am I right? He won't sign a bad deal?
I believe that's right, Hugh. The president has been crystal clear now for this for 4 months, really for 10 years. I mean, you can't say it any more plainly. Iran cannot have a nuclear program, and they can have a path to a nuclear weapon. And he doesn't speak the way traditional Republicans speak, who say, or else all options might be on the table. He says it very bluntly, there will be bombing. So he says, I think he said it last week or 2 weeks ago, that Iran probably wants a deal so they can live happily without death. I just don't know how he can be more clear on this. And a good deal, obviously, is a deal that cuts off all of Iran's paths to a nuclear bomb. That includes all of their highly enriched uranium and their advanced centrifuges. They don't need those centrifuges or highly enriched uranium for civilian nuclear power. There are a couple dozen countries around the world that have civilian nuclear power that don't enrich their own uranium. So there's plenty of ways for the president to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon through a negotiated deal that is a good deal. The only question is whether the Ayatollahs will accept any of those deals. And if they won't, Hugh, that tells you all you really need to know about their ambitions.
Now, there's a paragraph in this column that concerns you. It says, keep your eye on Senator Tom Cotton. He's a strong supporter of Trump and a hawk's hawk on Iran, as well as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Cotton would assess any deal with very critical eyes and would not hesitate to assess it as a disaster or close to one, or praise it if it deserves praise. Can we count on that?
Yeah, Hugh, again, I don't think I'll have to assess a bad deal because I don't expect the president would make a bad deal because he has been so clear from the very beginning about it, is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And again, that's not just for the last 4 months, it's for the last 10 years. The first conversation I ever had with Donald Trump was the summer of 2015, shortly after he entered the race, shortly after President Obama signed his awful deal, and he thanked me for my advocacy against it in the Senate and said that it was a terrible deal and that he'd rip it up once he got into the White House, and that's exactly what he did.
So what's going on here is that it's like he wakes up every morning, and if it's an odd numbered day, he says there will be bombing, and if it's an even numbered day, he says, well, the negotiations are going pretty well. That's just the art of the deal, but it weirds out people who hated the JCPOA. Are you upset when he goes back and forth, which is just the art of the deal stuff?
Yeah, I think he's been pretty clear that those are the two options, whether he emphasizes one or the other. He always comes back to the fact that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, which means they can't have a nuclear program with centrifuges and highly enriched uranium. I understand that some people around him and the president's orbit or the self-proclaimed MAGA influencers may stress that, Iran should be trusted with centrifuges or enriched uranium, or basically saying what Barack Obama did 10 years ago, which is either this bad deal or war, and therefore you have to take his bad deal. But the president himself, the president personally, has never said anything like that. He has always been very clear. It is either a good deal that eliminates Iran's path to a nuclear weapon, or there will be bombing. Again, that's not what George Bush would say. That's not what a lot of other Republicans would say. They talk cryptically and diplomatically about all options being on the table. But Donald Trump is very blunt and very direct with Iran and with the world.
I hope you're right.
So
I want to switch over to the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, plural, issued a reconciliation overview today that included 10 different things. I just walked through them with Admiral Montgomery. I want to go to the $13 billion for nuclear deterrence. Is that enough, given that the Columbia class alone costs $20 billion if we get those boomers in the water?
Hugh, I'd probably like to see a little bit more, but we're working within the constraints of the budget we passed a couple of weeks ago, and we obviously have a lot of other priorities as well. But $13 billion, I can tell you, is a lot more than what Joe Biden was going to provide, and it's going to help move forward nuclear modernization, which unfortunately is a little bit behind time and behind schedule, in part, Hugh, because of Joe Biden's inflation. When you're building new missile silos, new submarines, new bombers, of course, general inflation is going to affect the price of concrete and steel and other materials that go into all those weapons. So we've just got to accept the fact that these things are going to cost a little bit more than might have been projected 5 or 10 years ago. But, of course, our nuclear deterrent is the bedrock for our safety and security and really our way of life. It's not a question of can we afford it. The question is, can we not afford it?
Now, Senator, last question. It's 100 days, and everyone's doing their 100 days back. To me, the most important thing Donald Trump has done is close the border, not merely for the immediate consequences of allowing us to focus on those who cross the border illegally, but also proving that it could be done and that Team Biden just didn't want to do it. I don't know that we'll ever trust a Democrat again on the border. Do you think this night and day light switch on, border closed, versus Joe Biden arriving, light switch off, border open, do you think anyone's ever going to forget that?
I hope they don't, Hugh. There were months in Joe Biden's tenure when we had 300 to 350,000 illegal migrants crossing our border. Now we're down to fewer than 8,000. And I hope it continues to trend downward. We'll provide the president in this budget that we're going to pass soon with more resources to secure patrol agents, more immigration agents for enforcement across the country. But it is a stark contrast. And I agree, it's accomplished a lot in these first 100 days. But the single most obvious accomplishment is securing our border and putting an end to mass illegal migration across that border, in contrast to Joe Biden. This is not an accident. This was a deliberate policy choice that Joe Biden and the Democrats made, and one that Republicans have reversed.
Senator Cotton, always a pleasure. Thank you. I agree with you on the 100 days. You have a great week. Talk to you next week, Senator Tom Cotton. Follow him on X at @SenTomCotton. Let me check the market, brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. My friend Nick Rovich and his team, they sell bullion, they sell ounces, they sell precious metals, and they do it transparently, efficiently, effectively, honestly. If you're one of those very few coin collectors who really like, they do that too, but they don't recommend that for the average investor because they're honest. Those are not ways to save money. You can call Nick and his team at 1-800-221, make sure I get the number right, 7694, 1-800-221-7694. The Dow today was up more than 0.25%. The S&P was up just a little bit. The Nasdaq down 0.1%. And gold today went up almost 2% to $3,360 an ounce. So I don't know if it's getting ready to do another one of these trampoline jumps, but I do know this. Everybody in the United States wants to sell you gold, it seems like. You can see gold ads everywhere. The one guy that I deal with, that I love and trust, because he's been doing it for 42 years, and you can trust him. He's not a fly-by-nighter. He's not trying to shave a point here or there. He'll tell you the commission up front. The more you buy, the less you pay. 1-800-221-7694 or go to AmericanFederal.com today. 1-800-221-7694. The White House Correspondents' Dinner was held on Saturday night. Now, I've only been to one. I'm never going back. It was the year that a tasteless comedian whose name no one remembers insulted Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who, with under great grace and dignity, proceeded to become elected governor of Arkansas, and nobody remembers the comedian. But it's a self-absorbed navel-gazing exercise that was, for a brief period of time, interesting. Then it became overdone. Then it became overrun by newsletter people. And newsletter people aren't real journalists. That's a joke, newsletter people. I love you. But you're not real journalists. I mean, you write newsletters. But any of it, they've been run over by newsletters. And Eugene Daniels, maybe, I think his middle name is Insufferable. Eugene Daniels gave a little speech, cut number 28.
As you all know, every year we invite the president to this dinner. For decades, presidents on both sides of the political spectrum get gussied up and join us. I want to be clear about something. We don't invite presidents of the United States to this because it's for them. We don't invite them because we want to cozy up to them or curry favor. We don't only extend invites to the presidents who say they love journalists or who say they are defenders of the First Amendment and a free press. We invite them to remind them that they should be. We invite them to demonstrate that those of us who have chosen the public service of...
Stop, I can't. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, that's a C-SPAN feed. First of all, I wouldn't want the president sitting next to that outfit. All right? Generalissimo, do you have an outfit like that? For like tiki room days? You got a Eugene Daniels outfit? Because I'd like you to wear that tomorrow if you've got that.
That would be for a different kind of a day of which I don't participate.
No, I just love that outfit, and I would like to have you wear that outfit, but I don't think the president's going to go.
I think Prince is going to leave his grave and come back and sue for copyright infringement.
I really do think it's just a little bit over the top. Mr. Eugene Daniels, formerly of Political, now of MSNBC, telling me about the First Amendment, which I've been teaching for 27 years. I do not need a
public
lecture.
Service. The media does a public service, is what he said.
It's all about the money. All right, let's just be clear. It's all about the money. Now, I like Alex Thompson, and I'm going to give the book that he's putting out with Jake Tapper a chance. Maybe it'll blow the lid off the cover-up of Joe Biden. But there's a portion of his remarks that kicked me in the gut, too. Cut 29.
One serious note. To my bones, I believe that reporting and the White House Correspondents Association is as necessary as ever. President Biden's decline and its cover-up by the people around him is a reminder that every White House, regardless of party, is capable of deception. But being truth tellers also means telling the truth about ourselves. We, myself included, missed a lot of this story. And some people
Stop.
trust us less.
Stop. I didn't miss this story, and I am not alone. The earliest we found, and we haven't looked very hard, of my using the word infirm, because I'm not a doctor and I didn't examine President Biden, so I couldn't make a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. But I could hear him, and I could see him, and I watched him, and he was infirm. And everybody saw that when the debate happened, and everyone reached the same conclusion that I did, which is he's infirm. And an infirm president should be removed pursuant to the 25th Amendment. Now, what Alex is saying, I don't know what his book's going to say, but what Alex is saying is, oh, his staff did a really good job of covering this up. Shame on them. No, they didn't. They did a really good job of trying to cover it up, but they couldn't cover it up because he fell off his bicycle, because he wandered off at NATO, because he trailed off in every because of the red wedding speech, because of the State of the Union speech where he just yelled his way through it after 8 Red Bulls and a half gallon of hot coffee. I don't know what the guy was doing, but this was not, we missed it.
We saw decline during the 20 campaign.
We missed it. We did not miss anything. They didn't write about it. And by the way, they didn't miss it either. They were in on the scam. And that, by the way, is why the White House Correspondents Association dinner has fallen off the cliff of credibility. And Eugene Daniels in your prom suit, that is not going to bring it back. Vic Mattis is the weekend editor at the Washington Free Beacon, co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast, and like me, Catholic, and therefore leaning into the conclave news. First, though, I got to clean up from the Getting Hammered episode that I listened to on my flight yesterday, the role of Sister Jean in your cafeteria. I was led, you left me with the impression that she was something of an Obergruppenführer. What was going on there, Vic?
Sister G, God bless her. She was a wonderful nun and gym teacher, I want to point out, Hugh. But she ran what was known as the big annual spaghetti dinner, and she ran it with intensity, and she ran it with an iron fist, I must say. But it was always a success. And at the cafeteria, you could not leave if you were in grade schools, meaning 1 through 8. You cannot leave to go out to the playground until your tray was empty, much like in an army.
Okay, well, the potato salad in the pocket is worth the entire interview, Vic, because, of course, you being, 4th grade, forgot the potato salad in your pocket. Yeah. And there's no way I would have eaten... I would never have eaten school potato salad. That's a salmonella outbreak waiting to happen. I can't believe they even allowed that in the school.
Yeah, that was the 80s. And again, it was quite a disappointment because I thought it was mashed potatoes. We didn't get much of that at my house. We got mostly rice. So, the time was like, oh, this is really exciting. And one bite of that, I said, we got a disaster on our hands, quite literally. And I stuffed it in my pocket. I said, I'm all done. Get me to the playground.
Okay. You got to go to Hillsdale and see my buddy Scott Bertram. Did Scott tell you he's a White Sox fan? Because Scott's a White Sox fan, if you can believe it.
Yeah, no, he didn't play that up right now. At least now, in the early, it's still early in the season, as you know, Hugh. So no, he didn't bring it up, but he was great. He did talk about you being out there. He's a big fan of yours, and actually, all of Hillsdale listens to your show.
Oh, John Miller's a fabulous guy. I'm sure you had a great time, but I got to get to the important stuff. You had a conversation with Cardinal Sarah, and you asked him about the local mass times. Am I getting this right? Is that what you did?
I did. It was rather intimidating because he is a real presence, and this is a cardinal who's from Africa, and who has had attempts on his life, and there he is at the in the Vatican with his assistants, and we have this big meeting, and it's very solemn, and you can feel his presence and his holiness, if you will. But, I'm sort of not the expert in, the Vatican religious affairs was not my area. I was happy to be part of this journalist group that was there. So I figured, what the heck? I'm going to ask the first question. And it had to do with, at the end of Mass, before you say the mass has ended, go in peace. Our pastor at the time, who's no longer there, and this was at a different parish I go to, not the one now, he would say, are there birthdays? Are there anniversaries? Where are you from? Newcomers, everybody clap. And I thought this was kind of disrupting the flow of the presence because it's still there. And I wanted to know what Cardinal Sarah thought about that. And he gave a few seconds pause. He smiled kindly, and he just said very diplomatically that there is power in silence. And we should try to emphasize that.
Vic, when I was in college, Harvey Mansfield, the great Harvey Mansfield, came to our house for dinner. And this is one of the great political theorists of our time. And we spent the entire 2 hours talking to him about great inflation. What a waste. I guess young people just waste stuff. But I want you to know, I am preparing for the next pope by listening to Cardinal Sarah's The Day Is Now Far Spent. Have you ever listened to this?
No, I have not.
He is quite alarmed about the state of the church. And I've been reading the little snippets, and Francis's close-knit circle is unhappy with the pre-conclave talk about unity. They view that as going backwards. Yeah. I view that as, you mean they're not going to hate on the Americans anymore? That would be unusual.
Yeah. I feel like the Cardinals or the factions that you and I like, Hugh, Cardinal Sarah, Cardinal Burke, they've all been sidelined over time, in the last Pope's reign. May he rest in peace. But he was coming at from the other side. As you know, he basically has a supermajority, if you want to think about this in political terms, of that conclave in terms of who's voting. This isn't to say that the fix is in and the next Pope will be Francis Part 2. It's a mystery. It could always go in a different direction, certainly more towards tradition. But, I'm sure you're like me, bracing for the media take of, will they be more embracing of mercy and openness and compassion, or will they go back to their stodgy old dark ages?
It's the Inquisition about to launch. I want them to reach down and do what they call a deep select in the military and grab Archbishop Chaput out of his retirement in Philadelphia and put him in. But I'm probably not getting much of a voice in the conclave. My worry is that these 135 people, they have no idea who they're from all over the place. Francis was like throwing darts when he picked cardinals, right? Oh, let's go get the Algerian cardinal. Let's get the guy from Haiti. And those are both choices, and I'm sure they're fine Catholic populations, but really?
Yeah. I would like to see some of the Africans actually in the lead, since they're more conservative, and that would throw the media for a loop because they wouldn't know how to cover it. On the one hand, it would be their first, non-European or from South America of European descent, cardinal. On the other hand, to be the Pope. On the other hand, the views would be very much against what they think, should be the views of a new modern Pope from 2025. So that's my thought. And I would also say, beware of the Germans. As you know.
Oh, gosh. Don't even talk to them. Take their vote away. Vic, if Cardinal Burke emerged as Pope Leo the 104th, what would happen to the American media? Would it melt down in front of our eyes?
Yeah, I think very much so. And he's a good man. I also met him on this trip. He was very nice.
Did you ask him about confession times?
I did. Yeah. Why is it only on Saturdays between 3:30 and 4:30? Why is that, Your Eminence? It's so inconvenient for me. It should be like more open. If you want more confession, have more time.
That's what I say.
No, I think the conversation revolved around the Latin Mass is what that conversation was.
Vic, don't go anywhere. I want to talk to you during the break about something. Can I hold on to you for a couple more minutes? All right, good. Vic Mattis will be right back. Follow him at Victorino Mattis. Easily the most interesting handle on X, Victorino Mattis. I should have been named Victorino. I think Victorino Hewitt would have been a fine name as opposed to Hugh Hewitt, which Jimmy Fallon made fun of. I don't care. Not that I mind. Vic, I view the church in America as doing great at the base and irregular at the summit, meaning we got some strawy bishops running around out there and cardinals. But we got a great young group of seminarians pumping out under the influences of people like Chaput and Corleone and Gomez. What do you think about the church in America?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's sort of an inverse where, you have this growing movement among the young people, men and women. Certainly, I mean, I'm from Arlington Diocese here in Virginia, and that's extremely dynamic. And I understand there are parts of the country where it's an older generation, and it's a little bit more sad in that sense because you're not finding as many young people. But how you draw them in and how you attract them is through tradition. It's through mystery. It's through holding the line as a moral compass that the church is, and it's not just open to the winds of change because times are always changing. That's the problem. And once you go down that road and sort of dilute the faith to open things for more people in different ways, you're losing people because people want the guidance. That's exactly what they want. And you have people on top. You're absolutely right. There are people who will, have no problems, with the Joe Bidens or the Nancy Pelosi Catholics, or I think Lauren Powell Jobs recently said that she's very pro-choice and she's an observant Catholic. So I'd like to, see how they square
It
that
doesn't work
circle.
that way. You can't
No,
be
it does
that.
not work.
What I really want is someone to come out every day and say, Jesus Christ is Lord, he is risen indeed, and you should believe because the four last things are death, judgment, heaven, and hell. I mean, did you learn that, or are you too young to have learned that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, in New Jersey, went to Catholic school in the 70s, 80s. So it was a little bit softer than that message. And it didn't get sort of a more harder edge until I got older, which I appreciated and which I wanted. Faith is supposed to be hard. That's the whole point. And I think we lost too many people because we made it too easy.
I agree. Vic Mattis, always a pleasure. Death, judgment, heaven, and hell. That's what we're going to call the show going forward. Death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Thank you for joining me, Vic. Now I want to set up the draft next hour. I'm going to talk to Bethany Mandel a little bit, but I'm going to open by talking about the draft. If you want to talk to me about the draft, 1-800-520-1234. Open the lines, Harley. 1-800-520-1234. And I'm here to tell you the good news and the bad news. The good news is the Browns had the best draft of anyone in the NFL. And I will make my case coming up in the next hour. And I know the country was fixated on Shedeur Sanders. He's coming to Cleveland. I hope he turns out to be Tom Brady, drafted in the 5th round and gets 6 rings, whatever it is. We'll see. But what I really am upset about is that both Jack Sawyer and Will Howard went to Pittsburgh. They're 2 of the national championship Buckeyes from The Ohio State University. And I really fear, that Will Howard is the next Ben Roethlisberger, built like Ben. I really fear that Jack Sawyer is Mean Joe Green with a smile. I really fear that. That would be bad. But other than that, it was a great draft. I'm going to tell you about it, and America's obsession with other people failing, which I don't like. I'm looking for, and I've found the exact list of the Browns draft choices over the weekend. Now, I bring this up. On Friday, I told you Browns fans are a little bit nuts about the draft. And it went away after we drafted Baker Mayfield for about 3 years. We weren't interested in it. Then it went away for about 3 years after we made the disastrous worst trade in sports history for Deshaun Watson and gave up 3 years of first-round draft choices. So it was a nothing burger. But it was back. We actually had a first round. We had the second choice. And we thought we were going to pick Travis Hunter, a unicorn, a 2-way athlete, getting 2 athletes for the price of 1. Cam Ward being the number 1 going. And we thought Shedeur Sanders is going to show up pretty soon thereafter in a Cleveland uniform. Maybe they'll trade back in the first round to get him. There was a guy from the team up north, a fellow by the name of Mason Graham, who is ranked on some boards at 4, other boards at 5. Abdul Qadir was on the board too, defensive end from Penn State. But Mason Graham is an enormous force in the middle of the line. So if you had told me, like last week, if you had said, Hugh, not only are you going to get Shedeur Sanders, you're going to get Mason Graham, and you're going to get Quinshawn Judkins, and you're going to get Harold Fannin, who's this great tight end from Bowling Green that nobody knows about unless you follow this stuff. You're going to get Dylan Sampson, a second running back. It's going to be the reinvention of Byers and Mack, Biner and Mack from the 80s, Ernest Biner and Kevin Mack. You're going to get Dylan Gabriel as a backup to Shedeur. Great kid out of Oregon, 5'11". That's the rap on him. Got a killer arm, but he's 5'11". And you're going to get somebody you've never heard of before, a guy named Carson Schlesinger, who is just this knock the lights out of you linebacker from UCLA. You haven't heard about him, but he's a great playmaker. And, JOK's got some injury issues, and he's probably not coming back. I said, that's not possible. That's a draft day movie. They're not getting those people. They're not picking up Shedeur Sanders, Mason Graham, Quinshawn Judkins, Harold Fannin, Dylan Gabriel, and Carson Schlesinger and Dylan Sampson. Not happening. For one thing, you can't draft two people named Dylan. It's a rule, but they did. Those are the 6 they got. Now, the controversy is they got them in an unusual order. First of all, the Browns made this blockbuster trade and hoodwinked the new kid who's running Jacksonville into giving them their first year next year and trading down 3 slots. So they got Travis Hunter. Good, great. Great receiver. May he prosper in Duval. May he do well. I don't care for the Jaguars because their owner's crazy, and he fired Urban after 1 year, and I think that was nuts. But go forth and prosper, Travis. But then the Browns picked Mason Graham. I said, okay, so Shedeur's out of the picture. And Shedeur begins to fall. And so he doesn't make it in the first round, and the Browns are on the clock. They're drafting first on day 2, Friday. So I sit myself down to watch day 2 on Friday. And they draft Schwartz. What's the kid's name? Honestly, I'm just going to call him Carson Schlesinger. And I read up about him, and okay, I'm excited. He's a good kid. But Shedeur doesn't get taken, and he begins to fall. Then comes pick 36, just 3 picks later. Okay, here comes Shedeur. Quinshawn Judkins. Wow, they didn't want Shedeur. They must really be worried about the dad. I didn't know. I don't know. Then comes round 3, pick 67. Harold Fannin Jr. Now, I love Harold Fannin Jr. He's a Bowling Green. He's 20 years old. And he's going to learn from the chief, David Njoku. He's going to be a great tandem. They're going back to the Stefanski 12 offense, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. It's going to be great. Then they picked Dylan Gabriel, and everyone said, huh? It made sense to me. They just traded a backup quarterback that they picked in the 5th round a few years ago, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, for Kenny Pickett from the Eagles. And I figure, okay, they're drafting a backup quarterback because the kid's really smart. It's got a rocket arm, a little bit short. But, Drew Lock was a little bit short. Baker Mayfield was a little bit short. It's not the kiss of death. You can be a little bit short if you got a rocket arm. Then they picked Dylan Sampson, who is this rocket out of Tennessee. He's a good pick. Even Schroeder said that, and Schroeder never says anything good about the Browns because he's always weeping over Butler. And then Shedeur Sanders has still not been drafted. I mean, he's fallen like a rock, and I'm thinking 2 things. One of them I'm going to talk about with Terry Pluto at the bottom of the hour. Because Terry does a podcast that I always listen to on Tuesdays. Does it with David Campbell called Terry's Talking. Terry's my age. Been covering sports. He's been getting paid to watch Cleveland sports for 70 years, 65 years, 60 years. And I've been doing it. I've been paying to watch Cleveland sports and read it. So it's not really fair. But Terry's written a lot of good books, and he's a wonderful guy. And he's also their religion columnist, and he's fabulous. I've never met Roberta, his wife, but she seems like Saint Roberta, like the fetching Mrs. Hewitt is a saint. So Terry keeps saying in these podcasts, if you study the stats for Travis Hunter, he caught 90 out of 96 balls. He only had 6 balls dropped, but he had to come back to them a lot. They were underthrown. And I'm thinking, I wonder if Shedeur Sanders has got an NFL arm. Maybe he had a great receiver. See, Will Howard may have dropped a little bit, the quarterback from Ohio State, because he had the greatest receivers ever. I listened last night to the Buckeye Talk podcast with Steven and Stefan, and it was amazing, what they told us about the game and what happened after the game when the Bucs lost to that team up north, and how Will Howard rallied the team along with a couple other seniors and made that amazing run to the national championship. But Will Howard just reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger, and he got picked by the Steelers. Now, I'm on in Pittsburgh, WPIT, and I love you people. I really do. I slow down occasionally for you. I really do. I use hand signals. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I wave at you. I don't have any Steelers memorabilia back here. Carl's my friend, and Carl's all excited about Jack Sawyer. Gentleman Jack Sawyer, that's Will Howard if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. So Jack Sawyer is called Gentleman Jack. He's an assassin off of the edge. He's going to be there for years, but Will Howard worries me. Because he's going to go down there, he's going to put on, what do they wear, purple and black in Pittsburgh? Gold and yellow? What, I don't know. They got some funky colors. Nobody really remembers what the Steelers colors are. And if he goes down there and does the Ben Roethlisberger's thing, I'm going to be ill for the rest of my mortal days. Because he'll probably play till he's 50, like George Blanda. Yeah, I really do. I think he's going to play till he's 50 just to torment me. So I'm worried about that. And meanwhile, we get Shedeur Sanders. And I'm okay. I think it's great. That maybe he doesn't have an NFL arm, but for a fifth rounder, you can sure find out. And they're not worried about his dad. They're not worried about him. They just didn't think he had the talent that rated. They drafted Dillon not to be a starter, I don't think. I think they drafted him to be a backup. And that made sense in the third round because backups cost a lot of money and you got a salary cap issue here. So they got him under contract for 4 years. Don't have to worry about that anymore. And Shedeur is a lottery ticket. And the rest of the draft is great. So I'm jumping up and down. But the whole country is absorbed. And some moron kid, not a moron, a kid with a bad moment of judgment, like the judge in Milwaukee. Most dumb things are done on an impulse in a moment of bad judgment when you ought to say, is this really a good idea? I love April Fool's jokes. But no, you don't punk a kid whose life is falling apart in front of his eyes. And they punked 3 or 4 different kids in the NFL draft. One of them, Shedeur Sanders. And the young man has apologized who did it. Okay, it's not criminal to punk people. It was in bad taste, and he's apologized. Shedeur is being very classy about that. Deion Sanders is being very classy. But I don't understand why so many people were taking joy in Shedeur Sanders not going high in the draft. I really don't. I do not understand reveling in people's disappointment. I know Schadenfreude is a thing, but I don't get it. I don't even feel it with regards to Democrats and leftists. I just wish they would wake up. I just don't think it's healthy. Don in L.A., go ahead, Don.
Hugh, greetings.
Hey, Don, you got like 40 seconds, buddy.
Oh, quickly. Just, I'm glad you got Shedeur Sanders. Got him out of the way. I saw 2 draft things. Like you, I'm a suffering Raiders fan, so I know what it's like to be down there. So, greetings. But I'm glad you got him because there was 2 mock drafts that had us taking him. Thank God we dodged that bullet. So good luck.
I don't think he's a We'll see. We will see. It's going to be one of the great storylines. Hard Knocks should come back to Cleveland 2 years in a row. Now I got to go talk with Bethany Mandel about really serious stuff. Israel looks like it's falling apart to me. Shin Bet chief Ronan Barr announces he's going to step down from his role on June 15th. He should have been fired last month because the head of the government wants him fired. Bethany Mandel is one of the editors at the momwars.substack.com, and she and I are going to talk about airlines in a moment because I agree with her 1,000%. But first I want to ask, Bethany, you're Jewish, you've got 6 kids, you're Orthodox. Do you care what happens in the conclave?
Very much, actually. There was a lot of things about the last pope that, I mean, my mom was Catholic, so I've always had an interest in the Catholic Church, and I always will have an interest in the Catholic Church. There was a lot of things about the last pope that I wasn't a huge fan of. And there's some things.
He's an anti-American socialist?
I mean, you said it, not me.
Yeah. I'm Catholic.
I can't say that.
Look, I
can't
can pray for the repose of his soul, but he was, and by the way, I think he was anti-Semitic. He was at least anti-Israel, and he undid the work of Pope John Paul II and Benedict over 20 years in 13. Over 30 years in 13. It just drove me nuts.
Yep, me too. It was really disappointing. As someone who I feel like in a lot of ways I have my feet in both camps, it was really disheartening having those conversations with my kids, especially in the beginning of the war when he would call the Gaza, the church in Gaza, and my kids were like, why? Why? I'm like, well, yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, it was so poorly thought through, but it was not an intellectual. He did not represent a continuation of the John Paul II Benedict Magisterium revival. Let's go now to themomwars.substack.com. I was unaware, and I would be leading the revolt if I still had to worry about this, that airlines are charging families extra to sit together when, in fact, when they seat families together, they're doing everybody a favor and increasing the safety of everyone on the plane. Am I not correct?
You are absolutely correct. This is a hill that I've been dying on for years. I flew home recently from Puerto Rico, and it was like the trip from like the other world. It was such an awful trip. We were 6, 7, 8 hours delayed leaving from Puerto Rico, and we finally took off at midnight. And they seated us all apart. So my husband Seth was like, I don't know, 7, 8 rows ahead of me, and I had all 6 kids by myself. And I said to the gate agent, what if the masks deploy? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to put masks on 6 kids, 2 of whom are seated in the row in front of me? And she said, well, then you should have paid extra. I'm like, I don't think I should have to pay extra for safety. I don't think that's
no.
fair.
It's every other passenger on the airplane wants you to sit with your children too.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So
like
the
the easiest thing ever.
The poor guy in front of me, he had 2 of my daughters sitting next to him, and he had the aisle, and my daughters climbed over him every 45 minutes to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, of course they did. They're little kids. Now, if I were him, I would have switched with the kids. I love having small children next to me because they're small children. And I don't mind getting up. I like small kids. But as a matter of parenting, I would be very upset. Second thing, I will join your crusade if you'll join my crusade. I need to ban 2 things from airplanes: tank tops and cats. Are you with me?
Cats? Why
Yeah.
are there cats on? I'm really, really allergic to cats. I could not be more on
So
this
is the
train.
fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and they're everywhere. Dogs are on as comfort dogs.
I can't handle that. I can't breathe.
No, she's had to move back from business class to less class because of cats, because the cat owner won't move. I think it's illegal.
I mean, you shouldn't
It's like,
be allowed to have that on the plane.
what about tank
if
tops?
I
Are you
have-
with me on tank tops?
Sure, I guess so. I'm agnostic on the tank tops, but I'll join your crusade. That's fine. I don't mind.
You've
But
never sat with anyone with a tank top then?
I guess not.
No.
But the cat.
It's not an
if my-
enjoyable experience. It's a bad
my
experience.
kid has a peanut allergy, they make an announcement no one is allowed to open a peanut product on the plane. You should not have an allergen in the cabin if there are people who are allergic.
I think it's going to take one lawsuit, but someone's going to go into anaphylactic shock someday because of the cat, and then it will be the end of that. Let me go to the biggest issue of all, Israel. Ronan Bar, the head of Shin Bet, sort of FBI, sort of MI5, sort of MI6, sort of CIA. It's its own thing. He said he'll quit on June 15th. He was fired last month. He's quitting next month. What is going on in it? The whole doggone place is run like a PTA with factions and nuclear
Jews.
weapons. What's wrong with it?
It's
It's
Jews.
just-
It's just all it is. You can say the Catholic stuff. I can say the Jewish stuff. This is what happens when you put Jews in front of in charge of a country. It's not the
But
greatest.
today on Dan Senor's got a new podcast. Now this is on Call Me Back, and the new podcast is What's Your Number? And one of the guests pointed out Israel has gone up 10x in population and 460x in GDP since 1948. So
also Jews.
something is working there, but it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I understand
You
the
just
British
described
Empire.
the country. Mhm.
It's nuts.
Yeah. That's Jews. There's just we breed well. We don't run things particularly efficiently. If you've ever dealt with the Israeli bureaucracy, it is a joy. It is a wonder. That's just when you put Jews in front
I
of
was
the
on a
country.
cruise ship with a federal judge once, conservative. I'll leave the name out. And this judge fell and broke this judge's arm in Israel. And this judge went off to the Israeli medical system, and they patched up the arm, and the judge was back on the ship in 12 hours, didn't pay a dime, loved it. So obviously they have a good medical care system.
Shocking that they got good medical treatment from a bunch of Jews. It's all the stereotypes are true, Hugh. All of them. We don't run things well, but if you need a lawyer or a doctor, you know where to call.
See, we can just do dirty laundry. Catholics can't sing. Can Jews sing? Catholics can't sing. It's the worst music in American liturgy of any sort. Did you know that?
I mean, we can talk about my Irish Catholic grandfather who, like, we didn't realize that he was Alzheimer's for like a year.
Just please stop when you get to driving in Asia.
Yeah, we're not doing that. No, we're only
Neither of us
talking
are Asian.
about
We can't
our
go there.
own. We're only doing our own thing, and your tribe is unknown to anyone, Dwayne. So you go away. So my tribe can't sing. My tribe wants. How long is a Jewish service for?
I only count the pages. I don't even know. I don't go because they're too long.
Okay,
Thank
well,
God I'm a woman.
a Catholic mass that is longer than 50 minutes has failed, and so there are rules.
Oh
and
God, you can't be Jewish.
No, I couldn't be Jewish. Absolutely not.
Well, this
the bar
edition of
mitzvah thing?
Festivus with Bethany Mandel comes to a close.
Hugh is actually not Hugh. Dwayne has Salem in his ear, and they're like, pull the brakes, pull the brakes, pull the brakes.
Pull
Pull up! Pull up!
Run away, run away. Oh, Bethany, good to talk to you. Follow her on X at Bethany Shondark, themomwars.substack.com. Read about kids on airlines. I couldn't believe it. As promised throughout the show today, my old friend Terry Pluto joins us. Terry is not a political guy. He's a sports writer. He's the dean of Cleveland sports writers. But every now and then, a story shakes the entire country that has its epicenter in Cleveland. That happened this weekend with Shedeur Sanders going to the Browns. So I thought I'd check in with the dean of Cleveland sports, Terry Pluto, for his reaction to the Browns taking Shedeur. Hello, Terry.
You know, dean is a nice way of saying somebody's really old.
I know. I'm the dean of the Salem Radio Network broadcaster, so I'm
There
used
you
to
are,
that
yeah.
too. Yeah.
I know, academic world, I know dean's a big deal, but yeah. So where are we now, Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you resigned?
I mean, basically, if you could say, well, it's a fifth round pick, the contract's going to be barely guaranteed. If they don't like him, they can cut him tomorrow. That's true of most fifth round picks. But the thing that I sometimes get a little bit weary of is quarterback drama in Cleveland. And it just seems like they are so hopelessly addicted to it that it really becomes a thing here.
You were talking about the fact that we've had so much drama, really since Bill Belichick came to Cleveland in the 90s, that this is just the latest episode of the soap opera that is the Browns.
Well, let's look at, first of all, the Sanders story is unique. I mean, this is a guy that from high school on has only played for his father, Deion Sanders, the great defensive back in the NFL. Actually, even played some baseball too, professional baseball. He was his offensive coordinator, Shedeur's offensive coordinator in high school, and then later was the head coach at both Jackson State and then at Colorado. Shedeur played there. So Shedeur comes out, goes in the draft, and do you know who his agent was, Hugh Hewitt?
No, I don't.
It's his dad.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, now you're on. See, I think this is where he probably was a second or third round talent. I know some people had him rated higher than that, but that's probably where he was. And on top of that, you have a clue how much money he made last year between NIL and commercial deals and so on, because there's a couple reports. Take a guess.
$3 million?
Oh, 6.
Oh, dear. Okay. Well, Terry, I figured he dropped because I listen to your podcast, Terry's Talking, and I listen to you and Dave Campbell every week. And for at least a month, it's every Tuesday or Thursday, at least a month you've been saying, Travis Hunter's got great stats. He only dropped 6 balls out of 96 thrown to him. And he always had to come back to the ball. And you said that again
Mhm.
and again and again. I kept thinking, I wonder if Shador's got the arm. And so when they drafted Dylan Gabriel, I thought that's a backup quarterback. You know, they make money for you. You can trade him for a fifth round draft choice. He can play there for 4 or 5 years and then move on. But when they went to Shador, maybe it really is a lottery ticket.
Yeah, it is. And when you think about Travis Hunter and how gifted he is, part of the reason Shador looked good and his stats looked good is he was throwing to the best receiver in college football, one of the most remarkable athletes I have seen. And as you mentioned, on some of those long passes, oftentimes Hunter was coming back to the ball, jumping over two defenders to catch it. Now, this is not totally to dismiss what Shador was doing, but I think it helped his stats and to have a great receiver. Like when Johnny Manziel was at Texas A&M, he was throwing a lot to a guy named Mike Evans, who is become a star in the NFL. Of course, Johnny's long gone. That's one thing to keep in mind. And then secondly, I do think that the Dion and his family really just misjudged this whole NFL prospect or project. Excuse me. They messed up in terms of the whole process for the draft. You know, when you're a quarterback, they're looking at your leadership, maturity, and all that kind of stuff. And the big mistake was he came in acting like he was already a first-round pick for the draft.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate. Don't go anywhere, Terry. We're going to take a break for the network. I'm going to come right back and play. This will be right after the break. America, don't go anywhere. I'm talking with Terry Pluto. You can listen to Terry talking on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow him at Terry Pluto and sign up for his newsletter over at cleveland.com. Find the blue bar, look up Terry Pluto. I get it every week. I listen to Terry talking every week. You should too. Back now with Terry Pluto, because this weekend the country was absorbed in the fall, the free fall of Shador Sanders, one of the most high-profile college football players in America, down to the fifth round when Andrew Berry gave him a safety net to fall into. That's the general manager of the Cleveland Browns. And all of a sudden, Cleveland's, you know, if you had looked at the draft board a week ago, Terry, and told me we're going to get Mason Graham, Shador Sanders, the kid from Bowling Green, the UCLA linebacker, plus Judkins, plus the kid from Tennessee, I just said, are you drinking? Are you smoking something? Because that's ideal. But the way that it happened, Cleveland fans are left and the NFL's left scratching its head.
In a couple of ways. I mean, number one is they did have a chance to trade Travis Hunter. They passed on it. And the Browns get mad at me. Every time I bring this up, I ask the question directly to Andrew Berry. What was part of the reason that you made that trade, trading your number 2 pick for the number 5 pick and then another first rounder, some other draft picks, because you traded 3 first rounders and other stuff for Deshaun Watson. And I said that had nothing to do with it. Okay, fine. That's what they said. But it's wrong. They're still trying to dig themselves out from that. And that's exactly the quote that owner Jimmy Haslam said when he said that going after Deshaun Watson was, quote, a big swing and a miss. And he goes, and we need to dig ourselves out. Well, that trade was one way to dig themselves out. Now, they've drafted some really interesting players. Like I said, Mason Graham, a defensive tackle from Michigan. Junkins, Quinshawn Junkins, was really an excellent running back in the SEC, first with Mississippi and then later in the Big Ten with Ohio State. I just think that they're making progress in a lot of different areas. Sampson was the leading rusher in the SEC at Tennessee. They took 2 running backs. They took Dylan Gabriel, which to me was an odd pick as a quarterback in the 3rd round, which made me think, okay, they're out of the Shador Sanders market. And then they came back and I guess they decided, well, we might as well just take a shot at him, sort of the Shador Sanders scratch-off ticket and see how it goes and bring him in. But, with the Browns, they just always have this feeling that can they ever get anything right for very long? Hugh, they've not had back-to-back winning seasons since the late 80s. No, we're not talking about back-to-back championships or back-to-back playoff appearances or just 2 seasons in a row where they won more than they lost. In fact, it was 4 in a row. That was back in the Bernie Kosar era from your home area. And then that's been it. it's almost impossible in the NFL to design that sort of ineptitude.
Well, you know what I like, Terry? I like the fact that I was watching on NFL. Most people watch some of the draft. And when they cut away to
Mhm.
Stefanski and Barry, Jimmy's in the second row. Stefanski and
Yep.
Barry are drafting like confident guys. They're not drafting like desperate guys who've got to win this year. They're drafting like it's a 13-month draft. And I like that.
Yep.
Do you think Haslam has figured out this is a pretty good front office? Maybe I'll leave him alone.
I hope so. You know how so much can change in 12 months, because a year ago at this time, the Browns were coming off an 11-6 season, making the playoffs. Joe Flacco, you know, came to their rescue and led them, was comeback player of the year. Stefanski was coach of the year. Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator, was assistant of the year. I mean, he just went on. I think Myles Garrett was defensive player of the year. Everything was smiles and bright. And then they went 3-14, and all kinds of things went sideways. The good thing was, I believe Jimmy Haslam, who usually would react to something like 3-14 by firing everyone. I think he had two things going on. One, he's trying to get a dome stadium built, and he's fighting with the city of Cleveland and some other things with that, so he's busy. And I think secondly, by keeping Stefanski and Barry together, was an admission on his part that at least at the end, he was the one that pushed for the Deshaun Watson disastrous trade. And I'm not going to hold these guys responsible for something that I greenlighted. So I give him credit for that. But I'm also
when you and Dave Campbell talk about it, I know some people are tired of hearing about it, but if they'd even opened up the door a little bit 4 years ago and asked just some normal people, what do you think about this deal? They would have broken the blue bubble or whatever, the orange bubble that they were in, and everyone would have said, are you out of your mind? It is the worst trade in professional sports history, as far as I can tell. Maybe Babe Ruth to the Yankees is worse, but it's a franchise record when the counterfactual, and I'll give you a minute on this and then we'll come back, is sit Baker Mayfield when he got hurt and everything would be fine in Cleveland right now.
Mm-hmm. Very possible, because the thing that you make bad trades sometimes. You know, you think this guy can play, turns out he can't. But when they brought in Deshaun Watson, who actually has settled more civil cases for sexual behavior than he started games for the Browns. I mean, that's a fact. He started only 19 games. I mean, who wants that on your record? And you bought into that knowing that stuff like that was coming, a big suspension. You knew that Browns fans, especially some female fans that I know very well, I mean, they were just in tears. I'm not kidding you when they traded for him, much less giving up all those 6 draft picks and everything else. It was horrible, and it is something to dig their way out of.
It is. My brother-in-law reminds me of it maybe on a weekly basis, and that's because it will forever be a stain on the reputation of the Browns. But the good news is, I've never seen a more resilient fan group. We're about the same age. I don't know of any other fan base that's more resilient than the Browns. And so they're investing as we speak in Shador. Maybe not so wisely, but they're investing in him. Poor Dylan Gabriel must be wondering what happened. But now he's QB4.
Well, I bet all those guys, I mean, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco. Now, to be fair, this is nothing like the Watson trade or nothing like when they drafted Johnny Manziel in the first round. A 5th-round pick really is a football lottery ticket, and most of the contract he signs won't be guaranteed. His 4-year contract will be worth less than the $6 million that he made last year at Colorado. And out of that probably $4 million 4-year contract, maybe, $250,000 or $350,000 is guaranteed. It's nice money to you and me, Hugh, but for that guy, it's just picking up a dollar off the table.
It's quite a come down. Terry Pluto, stand by. I'll be right back, and America will put it all together on the podcast as well, so don't miss that. I got to talk to Terry about the Cavaliers, who may be the best basketball team in the country right now, because, believe it or not, stuff happens in Cleveland. I'm going off to do a special report tonight, so tune in to that. I'll be on with Brett Baer on the panel tonight, I believe. Don't forget your Relief Factor. I'm back in the Relief Factor studio in the Beltway, and I've got my Relief Factor. Took it in hour number 1. Want to remind you about it. Hour number 2, did 5 miles on the Potomac this morning. It is flat. It is not the Implacable Hill, and I'm very, very pleased with that because the Implacable Hill always presented something of a challenge to getting out the door. But getting down to the Potomac and running along the Potomac is just beautiful and wonderful and gorgeous, 70 degrees. You know, April and May and the spring and the fall in Virginia are just beautiful. The pollen season's over. I think that's behind me. Teaching took me long enough that I didn't have to leave California until after the pollen was on the ground. That's great. But the Relief Factor guaranteed that there are no wear and tear from the stopover at O'Hare and the up and down out of the dreaded overhead bin. And if you are not as lucky as me, either your commute is bad or your exercise was poor or you've got minor aches and pains, don't forget your Relief Factor. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Or go to their website, find that starter pack for 3 weeks, $19.95, less than $1 a day, and start Relief Factor. You can time it to the start of the new month of May, and 30 days from now you'll say, hey, Hewitt, that really worked. I really appreciate it. 1-800, the number 4, relief. That's where you call, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. Brought my consumer cellular phone back to the old Dominion with me, and working fine. Works the fine everywhere. You do not have to sacrifice anything to do with quality. Savings without sacrifice is what you get with consumer cellular. You need to call them if you want to make the switch. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Now, they have a whole bunch of different plans. If you're 50 years and older and you're not using a lot of data, you want one of their minimum data plans, like 8 gigs, and it's really, really cheap. And if you've got 2 phones and you're doing a lot of data, you want 2 lines, unlimited cellular data for $60 a month. You can't beat that. And again, savings without sacrifice. You're going to get the same quality everywhere you go in the country. But you have to get started. You can do it 2 ways. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh. You got a free month thrown in on the 2 lines for $60. 1-800-411-4454. You can get the switch done. Keep your phone number, keep your contacts. Or you get a completely new phone, your choice. You can get it done in 20 minutes, and you can save money every single month. My bet, you're driving in the car right now, you don't even know what you're paying for your cellular. That's my bet. Why don't you find out? Why don't you save money? Why don't you say, Hewitt, thank you for that. 1-800-411-4454 or consumercellular.com/Hugh. For a second month completely free, you'll thank me. You really will.